Good afternoon. I'm going to start video number 1 for the last chapter in Bio 101, talking about human genetics. I'm going to start out with a little review of some terms, talk about autosomes and sex chromosomes, karyotyping, and then end up this portion of video 1 with talking about some human disorders, abnormalities that occur within the autosomal chromosomes. So let's start with a little review. Genes are the units of inheritance, a portion of a chromosome, several hundred to several thousand base pairs of DNA that provide a code for the production of a specific type of protein. Genes are located at a locus on a chromosome, and our chromosomes and other organisms tend to have chromosomes that occur in pairs, homologous pairs that are inherited from each parent. Homologous pairs of chromosomes tend to have the same size and shape and gene composition. Most genes have several different forms that are referred to as alleles. As an example of an allele or alleles, one may be dominant and written with an uppercase capital letter. Other alleles may be recessive and written with a lowercase letter. Dominant alleles are always expressed, and that means their protein product would always be produced, whether they're paired with another dominant allele or with a recessive. Two dominant alleles are referred to as homozygous dominant. Two recessive alleles are referred to as homozygous recessive. A recessive allele, its protein product is only expressed in the homozygous condition. That means both alleles at the loci are homozygous. A heterozygous condition, also referred to as a carrier. A heterozygous condition occurs when there is one dominant and one recessive allele at the gene locus. Okay. Last two words that I'll mention are the alleles for a specific trait are referred to as the genotype for that trait. The physical trait itself and the expression of that physical trait, what you can see, if you will, is called the phenotype. Again, a heterozygous individual that contains one recessive allele at a gene locus is often referred to as a carrier, that they are a carrier for that particular condition and could potentially pass that condition to their offspring. Autosomes, as one type of chromosome, are chromosomes that are homologous and typically are involved in non-sexual characteristics of an organism, features of the body, the limbs, the legs, the arms, the head, and so forth. Sex chromosomes tend to be those that are involved in formation of the genitalia that determine the sex of an individual. We as humans have 46 chromosomes. 44 of them tend to be autosomes, and 2 of them tend to be sex chromosomes. A human male will inherit an X and a Y sex chromosome, and a human female will inherit 2 X sex chromosomes. Karyotyping is a means of examining the chromosomes of a human to determine if there are any mutations, any potential abnormalities, disorders, what have you. And a karyotype is a photograph of a human's chromosomes, typically when they are condensed in cells that are dividing. A human male has 44 autosomes and then an X and a Y sex chromosome. The female on the right has 44 autosomes as well, and 2 X sex chromosomes in the dashed red box. A statistician and geneticist of the name R.A. Fisher came up with the ratio of 50-50 for male and female in a sexually reproducing population. He came up with this back in the early 1930s, I believe. And you can see in this chart that a sexually reproducing female who produces eggs by meiosis and a sexually reproducing male producing sperm that either have an X or a Y chromosome, not both, that there is the probability of a male at 50% chance and female at 50% chance. And this would hold for other organisms as well that have the same type of reproductive system as us. The sex organs of a female are found within the X sex chromosome, and they will develop with internal placed ovaries, a vagina, and other such structures. And this is often determined by 6 weeks of age of development of the fetus. An XY embryo at about 6 weeks of development will begin to develop the male genitalia due to a master or homeotic gene on the Y chromosome called the SRY master gene. It is a master gene that turns on a number of other genes that are involved in the development of the male genitalia. The Y chromosome primarily contains genes that are involved in development of the male sex organs and contains a very small number of around 70 or so genes. The X chromosome, while containing genes for development of those sex organs characteristic of a female, also contains many characteristics that are non-sexual in nature, such as baldness, such as color blindness, such as hemophilia, and there are others that I cannot remember, to be honest. So the X chromosome contains around 2,000 or so different genes, and most of those are not involved in expression of the female sex organs. The sex chromosomes of humans are defined by letter A, the X and Y system, in which an X and a Y sex chromosome designate a male and 2 X sex chromosomes designate a female. This is not the only type of sex chromosome system in the living world. Note the chicken, which is letter C. So birds typically have 2 Z chromosomes equals a male, and a Z and a W equals a female. So the circle with the plus sign down below it designates a female, and the circle with the arrow designates a male, just so you know. The X and O, letter B, the X and O system, one X chromosome designates a male and 2 designates a female. And you see a grasshopper there indicating that it's found in insects. So the color-coded circles down at the bottom of the chart indicate the different sex chromosome systems in different types of animal phyla and also in plants. We end up the first video here talking about human genetic issues that can result from either some sort of inheritance pattern from an autosome, one of the body chromosomes, or from some type of X-linked pattern of inheritance, one of the sex chromosomes. I don't really talk a whole lot about chromosomal mutations and their effect in terms of different patterns of inheritance. That's more a topic that I cover in Biology 102. But for now, and what we're going to finish up this portion of video 1 with, we're going to talk about autosomal patterns of inheritance, and then in video 2 we'll start talking about sex-linked inheritance. So, it is possible to trace the inheritance of a recessive trait from one generation to the next, say in a family, by putting together what's called a pedigree. A pedigree is kind of a chart that tracks the occurrence of a condition through a family, using color coding, either squares and circles to represent males and females, and then shading in the circle or square for an individual that has the condition. An open circle or square indicates an individual that does not possess that particular condition. So the chart on this slide shows the different means of inheritance of the attached or recessive earlobe attachment. So the dominant condition there is the lobe is free, and the recessive condition is the earlobe is directly attached to the side of the face. I said we were going to end with autosomal inheritance. This particular slide mentions autosomal recessive inheritance. For a recessive allele to be inherited, both parents have to be carriers or heterozygotes. If both parents are carriers, the likelihood would be 25% that one of their offspring would possess that particular disorder or condition. So Tay-Sachs is an autosomal recessive condition. It's a degradation of the central nervous system that usually results in death by the time the child reaches age 5, as the example. So autosomal recessive. For this condition to be passed to offspring, both parents have to be at least heterozygous. Autosomal dominant is where I'm going to stop at with this first video. In this case, only one parent needs to contain a dominant allele, and the chance would be 50% that an offspring would also have this condition. So progeria is an advanced aging of a child that when they're 10 years old, they may appear as though they're 35 or 40. Huntington's disease is a progressive degradation of the nervous system. The body shuts down, but the mind doesn't. Marfan's is a pleiotropic disorder of the connective tissue. And all three of those are inherited from a dominant allele. So if one individual, either dad or mom, contains the allele, they can potentially pass it on to their offspring with a 50% chance of occurrence. So that ends the first portion of chapter 13. The second portion will talk about sex-linked traits and chromosomal mutations. Thank you and goodbye.